Welcome to This Just In, the show bringing you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and public policy. And now, for the fastest voice in healthcare, here's your host, Justin Barnes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the special edition of This Just In Radio. I'm your host, Justin Barnes. Today, we're broadcasting live from the HIMSS annual conference in Orlando, HIMSS24. Broadcasting from Radio and Podcast Row. Before we get too far, though, let me thank my radio and on-air producers, Greg Masters and Roberta Mullen. Thank you so much, team. Some of this came together at the last minute, and Greg was fantastic, and Roberta is always amazing. It's great to work with you guys always, and this is actually my 10th year straight as my first broadcast was live from HIMSS24 in Chicago. So thanks again for helping me keep this streak going. That was a phenomenal event and launched a great annual trend of key thought leaders sharing best practices and strategies to successfully navigate the future of healthcare. So over the next few days, we're bringing you the latest in industry's most sought after CEOs, CIOs, care providers, policy leaders, and visionaries. If you missed any of this episode and broadcast, all my content for This Just In Radio is posted at iTunes, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Google, and on the TuneIn platforms. As many of you know, my goal for broadcasting live each year for the HIMSS annual conference is to create an information medium that shares best practices, strategies, and actionable intelligence from the industry's leading sources and experts. We're also fortunate to have many of these guests as initial members of our Health Innovation think tank, where we transparently share healthcare and digital health best practices, as well as key strategies. You can find out more about the think tank at healthinnovationthinktank.com. My goal, along with all my guests here, will be to offer tactics and strategies to not only survive, but to thrive. You're going to even hear that from my good friend Rasu Shrestha, who will talk about surviving and thriving in his upcoming episode. But it's important that we all thrive as we navigate our hospitals, physician practices, our companies, or even your families through all these changes occurring in healthcare. There's more opportunity than ever before for all of us to thrive, but we must understand how healthcare is evolving, how policy and reimbursement is shifting, and where best practices and innovation can support our efforts. I hope you glean all of that over the next few days of broadcasting. That's at least my goal. Thanks again, and off to my next guest. Welcome back to This Just In. I'm broadcasting live from HIMSS24 in sunny Orlando. I'm very excited to introduce my next guest and great friend of the show, Dr. Rasu Shrestha. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Well, thank you, Justin. Real pleasure to be here in sunny Orlando, like you said.
Exactly.
It's great.
It's great to have you here. Obviously, this has been action-packed so far for you, the show.
It sure has. I mean, it's already been really, really action-packed. It's amazing.
And you're speaking later today or tomorrow morning?
Yeah, so I'm actually keynoting at the Best in Class Awards and presenting the awards and really being a part of that entire evening here at HIMSS. I'm really excited about that.
Love it. They couldn't have a better person.
Thank you.
So, obviously, you have your hands in a lot in the industry, one of the best innovators out there by far globally. But what progress are you most excited to see occurring in healthcare today?
Well, Justin, I mean, I smiled at this when you're asking me the question because, the obvious answer is Gen AI and the exponential growth that we're seeing in Gen AI, which is an answer. Mm-hmm. But I want to focus on something more than just Gen AI. Excellent. And I think it's important. I think, there are a lot of things that are happening right now that even at Advocate we're a part of in really leading the charge around trustworthy and responsible AI. And I think that's really, really important.
Yes.
But beyond that, two other things really quick. Patient engagement, I'm really psyched about this. I know we've been talking about it now for a couple of years, decades maybe.
Yeah, decades,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
But this notion of patient engagement and really patient empowerment.
Amen.
I think it has come of age, or it is coming of age. So I'm not celebrating just yet, but I'm really, really excited about the progress that we're seeing around that and the emphasis that not just health systems and providers like me and innovators are placing on this, but also vendors and the industry overall. So I'm really excited about that. But the third is something that you and I and other innovators have been talking about for a while, really around design thinking and starting first with empathy. And I think, on this side of the pandemic, Justin, when we've lived through so much, when we've seen all of these headwinds coming at us and these challenges that we've really circumnavigated in very exciting ways, focusing on empathy first and really embracing all of these elements of design thinking in the design of these solutions that Gen AI is expediting, that patient engagement and empowerment is providing a North Star to I think that's really, really exciting.
I love it. That's excellent. Great perspective. So putting our thought leader hat on again here, what healthcare or digital health trends are you seeing in the industry?
So I'll speak to one that I'm really excited about, and it really is around this broader notion of health at home, right?
Yes.
For the longest time, we've been so focused in on essentially the bricks and mortar facilities that are our hospitals, and hospitals are important. They're not going to go away. I'm a radiologist, and we're going to have patients come in to get scans when they need to, and procedures when they need to, and we're human beings. We break down. But for a number of years, we've really been focused in on what we at Advocate Health have been calling connected care everywhere. And this notion of what does care outside of the bricks and mortar hospitals really look like? And how do we make sure that we're able to take into account all of the different elements of the broader components of the digital exhaust that we're spewing out every day, but also the human needs and wants and desires and the challenges and opportunities that we have as communities. So this notion of health at home, really exciting opportunities there. Everything from sort of really acute illnesses that we're treating through our hospital at home program. Advocate Health now has the country's largest hospital at home program. Oh, wow. So really, really exciting progress that we've made there. Not too long ago, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we announced a really amazing partnership with Best Buy Health.
Yes.
In accelerating that hospital at home program to the next level, and we're excited about that. And then the broader notion of not just acute illnesses that we're treating through the hospital at home program, but also, think about chronic illnesses and the worried well, and really thriving, not just surviving from illnesses. So this entire notion of health at home, very excited about this.
I love it. So helping my audience and people here at HIMSS24, what are a few best practices or strategies to help navigate health at home?
Yeah. So, we talked about a couple of things already. We talked about AI and patient engagement and design thinking and this notion of health at home. So a couple of things that I'd put out there. First and foremost, anytime I look at specific challenges or struggles or opportunities, I say, look, but first empathy, right? And I talked a little bit about design thinking and the importance of empathy. But I think that's really important for us as innovators, for us, the C-suite, and for others in healthcare to really put yourself in a day off, fill in the blank, right? And I think that's really important. So whether we're out there purchasing solutions or we're out there, really trying to find the right solutions for these challenges that we have on a day in, day out basis, I think that's critical. Number two, I think it's really important for us to avoid what I call the shiny object syndrome.
Absolutely.
Right. One of the first things that I wrote in my whiteboard when I joined Advocate Health a little over 5 years ago, and it's still on the top of my whiteboard, is we have to inoculate ourselves against the shiny object syndrome.
Yep.
Right? Lots of shiny objects coming at us, and I think that's important. We do this with really embracing the strongest of academic and scientific rigor. We do this with really opening up what I call the living lab of Advocate Health, really experimenting, but also making sure that we have access to real data, real scenarios, and really focusing on working together with the right sets of partners across the board. Which brings me to my third bit here, and that is what I call curators of ecosystems. And I think that's our new job descriptions today, is we all have a new job description, and that is we are all curators of ecosystems. And I mentioned earlier, on this side of the pandemic, right? And I think about that all the time, is we've survived this global pandemic. Some would argue we're still in the midst of it. But how do we make sure that we're solving for some of the most challenging issues that we have in healthcare? And we know that healthcare is too darn hard, too darn complex for any one of us to solve all of it on our own. In fact, the only way we do this is through the power of strategic partnerships done right. And that really is what I think about when I talk about curators of ecosystems. We need to build up these ecosystems that are aligned around, specific shared values and a sense of purpose. We align our incentives. We bring in the capabilities that are unique to who we are, and align those capabilities in service of a greater impact that any one of us can get at on our own. So really excited about that, and that's a big strategy that I would really push forward with.
Yeah, and actually you're perfectly positioned for that too, because you're a phenomenal collaborator in the industry and healthcare in general. And actually one of the points that you brought up, I think when we discussed back, you're part of the think tank that we had back in 2017, 2018.
Remember that?
Yeah, and we talked about the importance of care strategy. I think in making sure that care continuum is integrated as well. So this shiny object syndrome, actually we would create issues if it's not fully integrated into the platform, fully integrated into the care strategy, into the care flow. You can really disrupt care and disrupt the patient and the patient experience, and obviously the patient empowerment that you spoke about. So you even were kind of 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago talking about this to an extent. Now you're institutionalizing it now with the shiny object syndrome, which I completely agree with. There's so much out there that can distract us. But again, if it's not part of a broader ecosystem, a broad integration, you can really disrupt what you're trying to achieve. So I completely agree there. So my final question is really looking out into the future and or looking into the crystal ball, putting on our hats there, and thinking, what's a key strategy that we need to think about successfully navigating 3 years from now?
Well, 3 years is an awfully long time.
In healthcare,
it's an awfully long time. Yeah. I would say, we're swimming in the midst of consumerism, or we're trying to understand it, right? We're not very good at it in healthcare at this point.
Very true.
Hopefully by 3 years, we would have understood it much more and really embraced it, and perhaps even, arguably led the charge in really understanding the wants, needs, desires of not just patients, but consumers, persons across the board. So the notion that I'd say that we need to master, and hopefully, would have gotten it in terms of a home run in 3 years, which, like I said, is an awfully long time, is moving from patient-centered care and broadening that aperture with the patient still always in the middle to what I call person-centered care, right? So it's thinking more holistically about not just the patient who by definition is ill or has a challenge in their health care that we're dealing with, but really broadening that aperture to more of a person-centered approach to health and care. And so that takes into account not just getting better from an illness and moving from the circle of illness that sometimes we as human beings fall into to this circle of wellness, and really then taking into account all of the elements of staying well as long as we can, for as much as we can, but also really thriving, right? So the notion here is moving from merely surviving to truly thriving. And I think that's important. And when we think about all of the different dynamics that we're really swimming in the middle of right now around wearables and technologies that we're embracing, our focus on health and nutrition and wellness, how incentive models are really coming together, not just for health systems like us, but also payers and others that are really abjectly focused in on actually incentivizing wellness and staying away from hospitals and emergency departments and ICUs, if at all possible. I think this notion of really then broadening that aperture and focusing in on the person overall versus just the patient, which is right in the middle, is a really important one. And I do hope that we'll be able to crack that nut in the next 3 years or so.
Yeah, I think we're getting there.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. It might 3 years, maybe 5 years, but I totally agree with you. But also, you bring up consumerism. I think that's also feeds well into your strategy with Best Buy. Yeah. They're obviously experts in consumerism, and managing that consumer in that type of a way. So obviously that went into the planning with that relationship, with that partnership.
Oh, absolutely. And really excited about that because Best Buy obviously brings in all of the elements of their omni-channel, strategies, both retail in terms of the retail footprint, over 1,000 different stores all across the United States, but also their online footprint, their logistics capabilities, their understanding of consumers overall. But also at the same time, what I'm excited about is really taking all of the technological and logistics capabilities and marrying it with the human elements, right? So it's not just throwing a set of digital and technology solutions at challenges that we have around the health at home space, but saying, all right, how do we bring that forward and marry it with empathy and the human elements, right? So think about the Geek Squad and the work that we're doing to really say, all right, how do we bring in the human elements and convert the Geek Squad perhaps to a health tech squad, and then bring in all of the elements of just monitoring, but the care teams that are around that human being, that is that patient, that is also a person, as we were talking about. So very excited about that for sure. Yeah.
So in our final minute here, you're off to, where are you going tomorrow? You're traveling tomorrow?
Yeah, I am. So I'm actually off to South by Southwest.
Very cool.
Super excited about this.
Is that your first time speaking there?
No, I've spoken at South by before. Okay. And this time I'm super excited that I'll be on the stage. Actually with Deborah DeSanzo, who's the president of Best Buy Health, and Chrissy Farr.
Okay. I know Chrissy too. It's great.
Chrissy is amazing. She's always really insightful, and she's going to be interviewing us.
Okay. Oh gosh.
And I
She's
know.
tough.
I know. She is. She is.
Good luck,
I'm super excited. Though.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. My listeners know you for sure, but obviously one of the best brains and minds in healthcare, and you always bring, you're not only you're thought-provoking, but also from a standpoint of, what's coming down the pike, how can we successfully navigate it, what are practical ways to engage it. So I'm always grateful for your time, and so thank you. And obviously, safe travels. This would be a quick HIMSS for you then. But safe travels to, is it Austin, obviously?
Austin, Texas, that's
safe
right.
Safe travels to Austin, my friend.
Well, thank you, Justin.
Thanks
Appreciate it. All right, thank you.
Got it.
Yep.
I'm very excited to introduce my next guest and great friend of the show, Dr. John Halamka. Welcome back to the show, my good friend.
Well, hey, thanks so much. It's typical HIMSS, 18 hours a day, and by the end of the show, no voice whatsoever.
Exactly. I assume, before we dive into all the great content, I assume it's been a great action-packed show for you already?
Well, the buzz of health AI and generative AI is extraordinary. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting. If last year was more about hype, this year is more about doing.
Yeah.
And so I've wandered the 5,000 booths. I've talked to leaders in government, academia, and industry, and they're producing real products with real impact and real studies.
I love it. Finally. I love it. I totally agree. So starting off, what progress are you most excited to see occurring in healthcare today?
Let me back up and say, what problem do we need to solve?
Okay.
Right? So I've been in 21 countries in the last 12 months.
Oh, gosh.
And in every one of those countries, the birth rate is less than 1.5. And what does that imply? Well, we need a birth rate of 2.05 to sustain the human population.
Right.
So at 1.5, you're going to have fewer caregivers. But people are living longer.
Right.
And so, if we're going to have supply-demand mismatch, kind of a demographic crisis, we're going to better need generative and predictive AI to help us deliver the care that is needed. So we know we need it, but how do we make sure it's safe? Mm-hmm. And how do we make sure it's effective? So probably the most exciting thing, all of these folks, these 40,000 friends around us, coming together to decide what it means to deploy ethical, fair, and safe AI. And it's a collaboration. Hegemony of none and benefit of all. And that's exciting.
I totally agree. I love it. So what, I guess you're touching on this a little bit, but what healthcare or digital health trends are you seeing in the industry today?
So ask yourself, again, problem to be solved.
Mm-hmm.
Hiring, retaining staff.
Absolutely.
That's a problem. Burnout. That's a problem. Margin pressure. That's a problem.
Absolutely.
So if I go up to healthcare CEOs or other leaders at HIMSS and say, do you want AI? They say, no.
Right.
What I need is a solution to my burning business problem. And so what you're starting to see is, if we have a technology solution that could actually reduce the burden of clinicians to document a visit or help them with decision making, or potentially offer hospitals and healthcare provider organizations different kinds of revenue streams, not selling data.
Right.
But maybe they're giving advanced care in the home, or maybe they're seeing more patients in more geographies with telemedicine and AI than ever before. It's a nice way of reducing some of their margin pressure. So, good.
Yep, absolutely. So to help people navigate those trends and some of those forces, what are some of the best practices you would share with my audience?
Sure. So I am not here to sell you anything, as you know.
Yeah.
And so I serve as the chair of the board of the Coalition for Health AI.
Yeah.
Coalition for Health AI is 1,500 organizations that have come together to write the best practices, the standards, the guidelines, and guardrails for AI. So go to the coalitionforhealthai.org. Everything on the website's free. And if you can say, my vendor actually has not tested the AI algorithm. It doesn't have a so-called data card and model card. It could have been trained in Northern Europe and used in Southern Africa. Maybe that's not good.
Probably not. But,
And so study that material and ask the questions. And let's make sure all of those producing products are transparent about how their products were built and how they work.
So following up there, the work groups, I noticed they're open. There's a call for nominations for work groups. You also can submit just to be part of the process in general and stay all updated. I actually noticed that you have a training session, like a 101 session for AI coming up, I think within the next 60 days or so. What's the timeline, say, for the work groups? When do you guys be selecting work groups? What's that cadence over the next?
So all of this happening in the next quarter.
Okay.
So we became a 501c6
Okay.
with a 9-member representative board of directors representing different affinity groups, and a CEO, Brian Anderson, and a budget.
Yep.
So we're real now.
Congratulations. I love it. And you're the board chair, correct?
Yes.
Congratulations, John. So thinking beyond today, and this is kind of the crystal ball and the real fun part of what I love to do when I sit here is thinking, I know 3 years is a long ways, certainly in healthcare, but thinking down there, 2, 3, 4 years, what must be ready for then to navigate successfully?
Sure. So you will interview many pundits, and they will say things like, generative AI will be sentient by then. We won't need data because it will just learn from talking to people. In fact, we won't need doctors anymore because generative AI will replace them. I won't say any of those
Correct.
things.
Good.
What I will say is this. Humans treat patients based on anecdote and apprenticeship. We read literature. We see patients. Every doctor has a different set of training materials. Shouldn't every doctor be able to realize the benefit of hundreds of millions of patient experiences and be able, no matter whether you're urban or rural, wherever you are in the world, you should get the best care based on patients like you? Well, what does that imply? AI is not going to replace doctors.
Right.
But AI will augment human decision-making.
That's really
And I'm thinking 3 to 5 years from now, it will be a standard of care in most specialties to use AI as augmentation.
Is there a specialty or care strategy that would lead itself to the front of that pack? Have you noticed anything like in radiology or?
Well, so it's interesting. As I said, travel the world, radiology is always first.
Right.
And why? Well, because they're more natively digital than anyone else, right? PAC systems pretty much everywhere.
I only know that because of you years ago talking about radiology. It's like 5 years ago. That's the only reason I know that. Yeah.
But also, they have been early adopters of technology. And why? Well, it gets back to this urgency and business problem. When I was a resident in emergency medicine, and we were just chatting about Southern California in the 80s and the 90s.
Torrance, yes.
You would see 30 slices on the average CT. Well, a human can look at 30 slices.
Right.
Today you see 300, right? Oh my God, how's a human going to look at 300 images and have, in 5 minutes give you an accurate result? Well, if AI can say, look at image 27 and 53, there's something odd there.
Right.
Really, it's an essential kind of a tool for your practice. So radiology is doing early detection of pulmonary embolism, brain bleeds, overread of fractures, and helping radiologists focus.
Yep.
I think you're also going to see the same kind of thing in pathology. I mean, it's early days.
Absolutely.
But a pathology slide is a vast amount of data. And say, look at that upper right-hand corner. And then cardiology, they also tend to be early adopters, taking telemetry from patients, using AI to help with decision-making. Yeah. But I will believe almost every specialty will end up with some aspect of AI in their workflow.
Agree. So let's talk about, because you mentioned this again, we had the think tank 2017, 2018, 2019, where you participated quite a bit, and you talked about bias in some of these. Right. So let's talk about that a little bit, because that's obviously something you talk about, how bring ethics into all this, but talk about the bias and what we've been able to learn from that over the last, say, 8 years, 7 years for some of this.
So I would argue every algorithm will be biased. Mm-hmm. There's no way to create an unbiased algorithm that works for every human on the planet. Mm-hmm. The question is, can you identify the bias and mitigate the bias?
There you go.
And so this is where we talk about a nationwide network of AI assurance labs that say, I tested this product. It works wonderfully on people in Orlando, Florida, and it doesn't work so wonderfully on people in Southern California. Mm-hmm. So great, use it in Orlando, Florida.
Right.
And if you bring it to Southern California, retune it on the data there.
Yep.
So it's that build transparency, which will give you a sense of reliability and consistency, which will give you credibility.
That's fantastic wisdom. So shifting gears a little bit, because I think you mentioned this is your 30, you've been here 30 years at HIMSS. I think this is my 24th year at the annual conference. We talked about our strategy for coming in, getting everything done, and then moving forward. But what wisdom would you offer to somebody who's trying to get the most out of HIMSS? It can be intimidating. I mean, 35,000, 40,000 people can be intimidated. It doesn't need to be. And so I try to help people no, absolutely calm. You can get out of HIMSS what you want to get out of HIMSS. Whatever you put into it, you absolutely get out of it. And whatever your goals are, you should be able to achieve them here. Everything is here for you. What words of wisdom would you share with somebody in that regard?
Sure. Well, there's absolutely a need to do pre-planning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Right? I mean, the show floor is 2 or 3 football fields strung together.
Exactly.
You can't just wander.
Right, correct.
And so what you have to say is, what do I want to get out of it? Oh, I want to look at these 3 kinds of technologies or these 5 companies. So if you pre-plan your day, you'll be able to do it all in one day. And remember, much of the value of HIMSS is outside the show floor. And whether it's an educational session, maybe there's something you want to pick up, or people you want to meet.
That's right.
The way that I work HIMSS is I start at 6 in the morning. I go to midnight every day. And in the evening, sometimes 2 and 3 dinners an evening. Don't worry, I don't eat at all of them. Because it's that opportunity of meeting colleagues.
Absolutely.
And it's really rare that you can meet hundreds of people in one place in a 24 or 36-hour period.
Yeah, very rare. It's a phenomenal opportunity in that regard. Let's talk about, well, first of all, you also have a very specific eating habit. So you obviously wouldn't eat at most restaurants, correct? Because you ship vegan and...
So I've been a vegan for 25 years.
Yes. Which gets more important. I want to bring that up because for my audience, I think thinking like that and moving this direction, however, all of us can, I believe, will certainly help assist you in living longer.
So it's personal health, it's sustainability, it's social good, it's ethics, lots of things to think about.
Yeah.
What you find is when I was a vegan 25 years ago, people thought I was some sort of hippie freak. Like, is that like, remember the junk food junkie song from the 1970s?
Absolutely.
Are you eating handmade yogurt in your pottery jar? Yeah.
True.
Well, no.
Right.
I was able back then, it was hard. I would have to carry foods with me. Today, every restaurant will accommodate a vegan diet. You can go to a steakhouse, and they'll say, oh, well, we've got great sides of Brussels sprouts and extra virgin olive oil. Perfect.
Perfect.
So just be kind and patient, and you'll be fine.
Perfect. And to close with this, I love the sanctuary. Tell us a little bit about the sanctuary and how you guys have grown. And
so my wife was diagnosed with stage 3 of breast cancer in December of 2011. Wasn't quite sure how that would go because it was metastatic.
Right.
She ended up receiving radiation, chemotherapy, and surgery, and she did fine. But she said, I want to leave something behind for the community. And so we started Unity Farm Sanctuary in 2012. It was a small sanctuary rescuing small animals. It is now the largest sanctuary in New England with 360 large animals in 22 barns with 1,000 volunteers. And a very exciting thing, this September are launching a full-time preschool on the property so that children can experience their preschool years in a farm environment, in a forest environment. They can be free-range children again.
I love it. This is a true story. I was driving here. It's the first time I just moved to Sarasota full time. And so I was able to drive to my very first HIMSS ever. And I was talking to my mother on the way here and she saw my guest list and she's like, John, that's Kathy's husband. And I'm like, yes, that is Kathy's husband. What is the name of their steer? And I'm like, Dudley? Yeah. And she's like, yes, that's it. So yeah, we're actually talking about Dudley on the way here. Dudley's doing well, I assume?
Dudley is doing well. He will turn 9 years old in June. 3,000 pounds of love.
Yes, absolutely. And this is probably the only time in history of healthcare that John will be at a conference and known as Kathy's husband. Because everybody knows John.
Oh, there you go. I was in the hall and somebody said, oh, I don't know who you are, but you wrote the foreword to my friend Sally's book.
There you go.
Yes,
exactly.
I'm always somebody's friend.
Amen. John, you're always a great friend of the show. Thank you so much for your insights, wisdom, and just all your thought leadership. You're terrific.
Well, I will see you here next year.
You will, my friend. Godspeed, man. Thank you very much.